Hello everyone, Phoenix601 here with some updates on Insane Mode for the Halloween event here in 2024. Right, so I'm going to quick go through the strategies and stuff for each, that I think I personally feel like are the solid ways to go, right? So starting off with Cruiser, basically what I'm doing with Cruiser play is hanging back, trying to keep the attention off of me, and just triggering fires, right? And I have switched to the consumable that basically makes everybody who's on fire have an explosion on them when you trigger it, right? So that has been working out. I noticed it working pretty well for somebody else that I had gotten paired up with, and I was like, that does do kind of a good chunk. And I think it's also working for fires that other people have triggered too, so not just fires that you have triggered. So this consumable comes back every 30 seconds. You need to be triggering it pretty much every 30 seconds, right? Like the 30 seconds while it's on cooldown should be enough time for you to get a couple more fires started, you and along with your other teammates, right? So when it is ready, I am triggering it, right? And don't forget to send torpedoes and stuff as your cruiser as well. And I think use your blessings as needed as the cruiser. I think it's a little more important to hold on to them when you're the battleship. But like with this loadout, right, you don't have a way to heal yourself, so you may need to use a blessing to like heal yourself here and there. But anyway. So jumped a little bit ahead in this fight. You can see we're going to do over 1 million in damage as the cruiser here, and we've got people lit on fire. At this point, we're in defend mode, and if you notice so we've killed the boss, and if you notice the prisoner ship is not moving anymore, right? So I think they've just implemented this change today somehow, whether like that be a hot fix or a quick update somewhere at some point. But it looks like you always get the battleship, right, the Iowa, and then it does not move like it used to before once you kill the boss, right? So this is a little bit more doable with matchmaking with randoms, and as you can see, we even lost some of my teammates there for that one as well. So so I was able to go through and play each cruiser, battleship, and destroyer and get wins within a few tries each, as opposed to playing like 30 games and still getting no wins on Insane Mode, right? Previously, you pretty much had to division up, right? That was the only way I was able to beat Insane Mode previously, was working together through a full division, and working together and making sure we timed our shield use and stuff correctly, right? So destroyer play, I mean, this is one where I feel like people aren't quite doing it right. Like you almost always need to be using the consumable here for the torpedo reload whenever it's available, right? Like it comes back super fast as well. But I think one thing that people aren't doing, I'm just sending torpedoes as much as I can, right? One thing people aren't doing too much is drawing fire every once in a while, because you have this instant escape that is this heal/invisibility thing, right? Like that consumable makes you disappear in an instant. So if you're suddenly taking too much fire and you need to get yourself out of a bind, you can use that, right? So we'll do it here too. So we're starting to take fire, but I'm still using my guns, drawing a little bit of fire, right? And then I'm like, okay, we took some damage there. So what you do is you trigger that, and then don't fire guns or torpedoes unless people are within that, outside of that 3.8 kilometer detection range, right? So basically, the second you fire either guns or torpedoes, that healing invisibility thing does disappear, right? But if you're within sort of the realm of like, if somebody's outside of that 3.8 kilometer detection range, right, you could, just go back to just using torpedoes, right, because you won't get detected again, but, you won't be getting the healing, right? So you got to figure out the balance there. I recommend trying to draw some fire here and there when you can, and then also using those HE shells to try and trigger fires on enemies, just because, if you've got a cruiser that's using that consumable, he can set off those explosions, right, on anybody that's got a fire, and that's super valuable. I'm going to play through my whole battleship game here because this was kind of the most entertaining one, but also I want to highlight, you notice I used my shield and I used my EMP pulse fairly early on here, right? This is another scenario of like, use your consumables. Like, people hold on to them way too much, I think, when I go playing within matchmaking, right? So if you're with a party, right, or if you notice, a trend, right, with your, with Battleship, I feel like this is the one where it's the most valuable to, like, ping pong off of, one of you uses shield, one of you holds onto it. And then when that one runs out, then the other uses shield while the other holds on, right? So, like, if you noticed you're, a teammate and you've got another Battleship on your team, alternate with him if you can, right? Try and pay attention to when he triggers his and, notice that you've got a shield, right? And then the only other time you'd want to use it outside of that is if you absolutely needed the health, right? You needed to heal, right? And then similarly with the EMP, that is a little bit more worth hanging on to here and there. But yeah, you can see, like, I've already got my shield back, right? We're in the intro phase still. Like, look how quickly we took out all of these enemies, right? That was pretty quick. And I got my shield back, and my EMP already has 20 seconds, right? And I'm noticing some people just holding on to that, until they absolutely are desperate for it, right? You have to think as a Battleship player, you're using your shield to help your teammates just as, more so than you might be helping yourself, right? You just have to keep that in mind, right? And the EMP also does damage too, right? Like, it's not just a disabler of torpedoes and ships. So you are getting a little bit of damage output done by doing that. The key, I think the huge thing with Battleship play is to hold on to all of these blessings, right? Push your select button or whatever to hide it when they pop up, and hold on to them for the boss fight, because I'm going to show you just how valuable that is once the boss swings around, right? Okay, so he's out there, the boss is out there, but I don't pay too much attention to him. I'll get a couple of cheap shots on him here and there if he does show up within, like, range and he's broadside, if it's convenient. But wait till, like, I think it's the third wave, right, where he swings around and actually comes close to your prisoner ship, because that's where it's going to be most valuable to then use all of your blessings all at once, right? And then you're basically, doubling up on those buffs that you get. Yeah, so we can see him out here, or her, right? And I'll take a few shots to just kind of get the ball going, but I'm not caring too much about the boss at this point, right? Like, the other guys that are getting closer to the prisoner ship, right? It makes more sense to go after them. I do think also as a Battleship, I like to press forward a little bit as each wave comes, but then I'm usually consistently moving back towards the prisoner ship as the waves approach, right? So we get a couple decent shots here, right? Like, he's angled pretty good, and some other people have hit him also. I'm going to guess that somebody here used their blessing as he was coming by, because that was a pretty good chunk of damage, right? So, like... but that's my guess there, right? And you can see here we have already lost both destroyers, and at this point, previously, I think this game would be completely unwinnable, but it is not, right? It is totally doable here still, but yes, it is going to be a bit of a carry if you are in this scenario and you've lost 2 ships, right? I'm not gonna lie. So we will plow through this here as best we can. And you notice, yeah, I'm backing up and heading back towards the prisoner ship, especially as this wave of destroyers spawns in here as well. We're going to have to try and focus on them. I do have I'll go through the build here too, but I do have the better secondaries. I would recommend that over some of the other choices when you're doing the commander loadout, right? Because your secondaries are almost always firing, right? So, like, I feel like you're leaving something on the table by not picking that, because, they're almost always firing both sides of the ship, right? Like, it's valuable, right? So, but yeah, so I'm here trying to kind of alternate between EMP and shield as best I can, and I think my Battleship partner here does a decent job of not using his shield when I've used mine, and so on, right? So, like, that makes a big difference. And then I switched to HE here too. Just because I was trying to target these destroyers, but most of the time I'm trying to go as the Battleship. I'm trying to do a lot of damage to the Battleship enemies and the cruisers, and I'm using AP most of the time. But switch when it makes sense. Here's some torpedoes going past, so it'd be nice to have the EMP ready. But in reality, I think those end up missing the Iowa, right? So you kind of have to keep that in mind as you're the Battleship player. At this point, this phase with how much we've got pushed back, right? I'm trying to keep myself in between the enemies and the prisoner ships, right? So I'm gonna hide this blessing too. I don't need this yet. I'm gonna use shield because I need a little bit of health. Right, I switched to AP going after this battleship. Right, he's gonna angle away, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, he's the last one of this wave, and then at this point is when, you know, you're gonna the boss pretty much takes the same route every time, right? So depending on which corner of the map you get put in, right? Like keep an eye on his pattern because it's the same, right? Like he does. So he's coming for the you know, for the prisoner ship at this point, and he comes right up by him, right? So I know he's on his way. I know that once I get rid of this battleship here, this pestilent Vard, right, like I'm gonna want to focus fire on the boss. And the other nice thing that they've changed too here, I think I brought this up earlier in the video, right, but once you take the boss out, that the prisoner ship, right, it seems to always be the Iowa now. It seems to always be the battleship, which is nice because then he's actually got some health, right? Like the cruiser and destroyer would always go down super fast. But yeah, here I'm going to use both of my blessings, and I'm picking both offensive ones, right? Whether it be reload speed or more damage, I don't care, right? I just happen to get both that are more damage, I think, and just watch the like massive chunky amounts of damage that we can do to this boss now at this point, right? So like we're doing huge chunks, right? And I've had this too where it's been both reload, and that's fine too, because then you're shooting your main guns like crazy, like they're reloading in less than a second when it's, you know, double reload. Here I got double damage, and we're just doing huge chunks of damage, but we gotta wait out the reload, right? Like, so it's fine. Either way, it seems to not matter. You know, you do want to be careful about being broadside to him, because if he's looking at you, especially if you're the cruiser, right? Like, stay back if you're the cruiser, like he will take you out, right? Like, keep your distance, launch your long-range torpedoes, launch your you know, light people on fire from a distance as best you can, and trigger that consumable. But yeah, this guy, like, we make it look easy here by just doubling up on the blessings. So I think that as a battleship player, that's kind of what you got to do, right? You don't need to use those blessings as they come, because you know, you're doing plenty of damage. You got your secondaries, you got your AP rounds, right? And then, you know, you've got your shield consumable, which will heal you, right? So you know, as long as you're kind of doing it right, playing conservative, move up and then move back as the waves come, you should be okay. The battleship is, I mean, it's terribly, like, the maneuverability on it's just freaking awful, right? Like, we all know that, right? But yeah, so here I'm just staying back by the battleship, the prisoner ship, right? And he's not moving, so this makes life hella easier now. So like I said, this is very, very doable by going through matchmaking now, right? You're still going to run into people that just kind of are bad, right? Like, that's kind of the nature of the beast that this is, right? So if you are struggling, right, like, and you can find somebody, like I may show up on live stream and help people through this one of these nights, right? So keep an eye out for me if I've got time for doing that and I don't get too frustrated with it myself, right? But yeah, so like, but yes, it is totally doable. You're gonna have to do some carrying here, right? Like, I am down to me and the other battleship, right? I think 2 decent battleship players that are ping-ponging each other's shields and stuff like that, I think that's the biggest key. And then the battleships also holding on to those blessings until the end so that you can actually do damage against that boss that feels a little bit more realistic, right? Like, because, like, otherwise it's just, I know, like, if you're the destroyer, right, like, it's just like you're lobbing torpedoes at that boss and it feels like it's not doing anything, right? So battleship's probably the way to go. Hold on to the blessings, use all the offensive ones, right, and do focus fire on that boss. So torpedoes everywhere, so I triggered the EMP pulse. I forget what that consumable is actually called, right? But so we lost our other battleship, so now it is just me, and we are again up over 1 million damage, flying solo here. And this is great because the timing just works out so perfectly. Like, we won it, and then I died, and the boss even, like, made fun of me, right? You would have won, but but it does give us the win here at the end, so we got a little bit lucky with this one, right? I was, like, kind of surprised. I was, like, about to throw my controller, and then I wait and see it. It does give me the victory, right? So it's possible to do. It's flying solo there. But yeah, you can see operation complete. We had already beaten it on insane mode previously, so I didn't get any more shadow coins this rate. So, but yeah, up over 1 million damage. We'll see what the team results page looks like too, just out of curiosity here as well. Yeah, that puts us at the top. I mean, kills aren't a big thing, but obviously they're helpful, right? But it's really all about like doing damage, right? Like just use your consumables, like use them. Like I feel like people just don't use them enough, right? I think the only ones that are like really strategery need to be like timed well would be between battleships using shields and stuff, right? So just something to keep in mind, right? Like just use those consumables. You get infinite number of them. There's no reason to like save them. Right, so there's a bunch of other stuff like missions for beating it on nightmare mode that like aren't really a big deal because you don't get extra shadow coins, right? So you just need to beat it once, right? Unless you're interested in like patches and stuff. But here's how I've built out the battleship, right? So I went HP for the first row, reload for the second row, right? And then cooldown for all consumables for this third row. Originally, I was using, you could do shell grouping. I don't think it's, it feels bad, but that's kind of the nature of the beast, right? Originally, I tried the ramming damage one because 95%, ramming damage, like that's huge. But you can't ram the boss. It does not work. So that's kind of useless to me, right? Like it's so rare that I've rammed anybody, right? So it doesn't seem worth it. I think this bottom row, you could kind of pick and choose your own, but like I said, what's working for me is the secondary assault, right? 100% more secondary shell damage, right? Like, so basically doubling your secondary shells damage output, and then, like, since you're almost always with, there's almost always somebody in secondary range, right? It's 6 kilometers base. So, yeah. And then so I'll quick go through cruiser and destroyer builds too. My original assumption was to use these healing rounds, and I think that's not the case anymore, right? Like, I think this fiery explosion works a little bit better than I was thinking originally. So some of my videos from earlier this week, because I was using this and I saw other people using it, right? And if you're just focusing on lighting multiple enemies on fire and then triggering it every single time it's available, that ends up stacking up over time, right? So yeah, this inversion charge, I've moved away from that now. I did build into, radar or sonar. I think you could fight about that all day. I don't think it's a big deal, right? I like the radar just because I can trigger it early as each wave shows up, and then you can kind of see where everybody is. But it's not a big deal. So this is how I originally built it out for the cruiser, right? I had all down this left side. I think this Pyromania one on the third row is a must, right? Because it's increasing your fire setting chances. But what I've done now, and what I did in the gameplay, right, is the first 2 rows I went with the defensive perks, because as you're using that fiery explosion perk, right, you don't have any way to heal yourself, right? So I went for the more HP and the more defense, right? So that's how I've changed that up now that I've switched to using that fire perk. And then, hold on to your blessings if you can, but use, if you get a heal one and you need to use your heal, use the heal one when you need it, right? Stay alive, right? So, and then for the destroyer, I think it's all about torpedoes and torpedo reload, right? So this is how I've picked it out. Reload time, damage here, that's what I've done. And then I'm using HE shells here and there to either draw fire or just trigger, draw fire from enemies, or just trigger fires on enemy ships, so that if you notice the cruiser is using that explosive perk, right, that explosive consumable, you're helping them out by triggering fires on enemies, right? So that is my new 2 cents, since they've sort of tweaked how insane mode works, right? And now it is possible, of course, to carry a few potatoes through, right? So go out there and do your part, I guess. But thank you guys so much for watching my video all the way through. We do World of Warships Legends videos pretty much every single day, so make sure you are following the channel, and we will see you guys tomorrow.